Today, we'll hear a heartfelt tale from the American frontier, where a desperate orphan and wounded lawman forge an unlikely bond that challenges their divided town. The summer of 1882 brought relentless heat to the small frontier town of Redemption, Creek, nestled in the foothills of the Wyoming Territory. Dust hung perpetually in the air, coating everything in a fine layer of grit that seemed to symbolize the harshness of life in this unforgiving land. For 13-year-old Elijah Mason, the town had never truly been home. Orphaned at the age of 8 when influenza took his parents within days of each other, he had been shuffled between reluctant caretakers before landing at Widow Simmons, at the boarding house, a place that was more prison than sanctuary. Elijah's small frame belied his determination and intelligence. With sandy brown hair that fell across his forehead and eyes that had seen too much sorrow for someone so young, he kept to himself, working odd jobs around town to pay for his keep. The widow wasn't cruel, just indifferent, viewing the boy as little more than another mouth to feed in exchange for the meager stipend provided by the town council. That particular Tuesday in July, Elijah had risen before dawn, as was his habit. The boarding house was silent as he slipped out the back door, a small bundle of possessions tucked under his arm. For months, he had been secretly saving every penny he could, planning his escape to Denver, where he'd heard orphans could find work in the growing city. He had exactly $7.43 to his name, not much, but enough for a stagecoach ticket if he could convince the driver he had family waiting. The town was still sleeping as Elijah made his way toward the stagecoach office. The only sign of life was the dim light glowing from the sheriff's office, where Deputy Thomas Reed often worked through the night. Elijah ducked into an alley when he saw movement through the window. The last thing he needed was to be caught by the law before he even had a chance to leave. Deputy Reed was a relatively new arrival to Redemption Creek, having come from St. Louis just over a year ago. At 32, he had the weathered look of a man who had seen his share of hardship, but there remained something honest in his blue eyes. Unlike Sheriff Watkins, who seemed more interested in maintaining the favor of the town's wealthy cattle baron, Calvin Blackwood, the deputy appeared genuinely committed to upholding the law with fairness. Elijah waited in the shadows until the deputy turned away from the window before continuing toward the stagecoach office. He was almost there when shouts erupted from the saloon. Even at this early hour, there were often miners or cowboys who had drunk through the night. But these weren't the usual drunken hollers. These were cries of alarm. Gunshots cracked through the morning quiet. One, then two more in rapid succession. Elijah froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. The door of the sheriff's office burst open and Deputy Reed rushed out, revolver drawn. From the saloon emerged 3 men, bandanas pulled up over their faces, guns in hand. One of them, tall and broad-shouldered, spotted the deputy and fired without hesitation. Deputy Reed went down hard, clutching his side. The bandits mounted horses that had been tethered nearby and galloped out of town, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Elijah should have run then. This was his chance, while everyone would be distracted by the robbery and the wounded deputy. Instead, something compelled him to approach the fallen lawman. "Deputy Reed," Elijah knelt beside him. "Sir, you're bleeding bad." The deputy's face was ashen, his breathing labored. Get the sheriff," he managed to say. "Sheriff ain't here," Elijah replied, glancing around. A few townspeople were beginning to emerge from buildings, but they kept their distance. "Let me help you inside." With strength born of necessity, Elijah helped the much larger man to his feet and supported him back to the office. Inside, he eased the deputy into a chair and frantically looked around for something to stop the bleeding. "Drawer," Reed gasped, pointing to his desk. "There's bandages." Elijah found clean bandages and a bottle of whiskey. He'd seen enough injuries in his young life to know what needed to be done. With careful hands, he helped remove the deputy's jacket and shirt, revealing an ugly gunshot wound in his side. This is gonna hurt," Elijah warned before pouring whiskey over the wound. Reed hissed in pain but didn't cry out. The boy worked quickly, pressing bandages against the bleeding and wrapping them tightly. "You're handy to have around," Reed said through gritted teeth. "What's your name, son?" "Elijah Mason, the orphan boy from Widow Simmons' place." It wasn't a question. In a town the size of Redemption Creek, everyone knew everyone, even if they didn't really know them at all. "Yes, sir," Elijah replied, finishing the bandaging. He glanced toward the window, calculating. The stage would be leaving soon, and here he was, helping the very man who might prevent his escape. "Where were you headed so early, Elijah?" Reed asked, his lawman's instinct still sharp despite his injury. Elijah hesitated, then sighed. "Nowhere now, I reckon." The door burst open, and Sheriff Watkins strode in, his bulky frame filling the doorway. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Elijah. "What's the boy doing here?" "Saved my life, I expect," Reed replied weakly. "Robbers hit the saloon. 3 men, they were Blackwood's men, Sheriff." Watkins' face hardened. "Now, Tom, you don't know that?" I recognized Jim Cordell's voice, even with that bandana, and that was definitely Blackwood's foreman with him. "You're delirious from the pain," Watkins dismissed. "Blackwood's men wouldn't rob their own boss's saloon. Unless they were after something else," Reed insisted. "Check the safe in the back room." Watkins scowled, but left to investigate. As soon as he was gone, Reed grabbed Elijah's arm. "Listen to me, boy. This goes deeper than a simple robbery. Blackwood's got the sheriff in his pocket, and I've been gathering evidence of land grabs, water rights theft, and worse. There's papers in my desk at home, evidence that could put Blackwood and his men away for good." "Why are you telling me this?" Elijah asked, bewildered. "Because they'll be coming to finish the job, and I need someone I can trust." Reed's eyes bored into his. "You were running away, weren't you?" Elijah nodded reluctantly. "I can't blame you, but I'm asking you to help me first. Help me get to my cabin outside town. Help me get that evidence to the federal marshal in Cheyenne." The request hung in the air between them. Elijah glanced toward the door, thinking of the stagecoach that would soon depart without him. Then he looked back at the wounded deputy, the man who had always treated him with kindness when most others in town barely acknowledged his existence. "All right," Elijah said finally, "I'll help you. Are you enjoying our story? Tell us where you're watching our videos from. Leave a comment with your city and what kind of stories you enjoy most. Suggest a story for us to tell next. We love hearing from you. Now, back to our tale. Word of the deputy's shooting spread through Redemption Creek like wildfire. By midday, Elijah had managed to procure a wagon from Mr. Hollister, the town blacksmith who harbored no love for Blackwood or the sheriff. With the deputy concealed beneath blankets in the back, they set out for Reed's cabin in the foothills, about 5 miles outside of town. "Why's a federal lawman living in a place like Redemption Creek anyway?" Elijah asked as he guided the horses along the rutted trail. Reed managed a pained smile. "I'm not federal, not officially, but I've been corresponding with the marshal's office in Cheyenne. Blackwood's been buying up homesteads, some legal, some not so legal, diverting streams, forcing out small ranchers. He's aiming to control the whole valley, and the sheriff lets him. Watkins gets a cut of everything. He makes sure the law looks the other way." The boy processed this information silently. Politics meant little to him. Survival had always been his primary concern, but even he understood the injustice of what was happening. They reached the cabin as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. It was a modest structure, sturdy and well-maintained, set back against a stand of pines with a clear view of the approach. Elijah helped Reed inside and got him settled on his bed before searching for the documents as instructed. Bottom drawer of the desk. There's a false bottom, Reed directed. Elijah found the hidden compartment and pulled out a packet of papers, deeds, contracts, letters, and sworn statements from homesteaders who had been threatened or forced out. That's it, Reed confirmed. That's enough to bring down Blackwood and half the town council with him. What do we do now? Elijah asked, replacing the papers. Now we wait for dark. There's a night train that passes through. We'll flag it down at the bend and be in Cheyenne by morning. But as the shadows lengthened, it became clear Reed was in no condition to travel. His wound had begun bleeding again, and fever set in rapidly. Elijah did what he could, changing bandages, applying cool compresses, making strong coffee to keep the deputy alert. "You'll have to go without me," Reed said as night fell. "Take the papers to Marshal Collins in Cheyenne. Tell him everything." "I can't leave you," Elijah protested, "and I don't know nothing about marshals and evidence." "You're smarter than you think, Elijah. And you're braver too." Reed's voice was weak but determined. "This might be your only chance. They'll be looking for you in town by now." The boy paced the small cabin, conflicted. He'd planned to run away, yes, but not like this. Not carrying documents that could bring the wrath of powerful men down upon him. Yet there was something about the trust Reed placed in him that stirred a feeling long dormant within him, a sense of purpose, of being needed. A sound outside interrupted his thoughts. Horses approaching. Reed struggled to sit up. "Get the rifle," he whispered urgently, "and the papers." Elijah grabbed the Winchester rifle from the wall rack and the packet of documents from the desk. Through the window, he could make out 3 riders in the moonlight. One of them was Sheriff Watkins. "Out the back," Reed ordered. "There's a trail through the pines that leads to the railroad tracks. You can make it if you run." "I'm not leaving you to die," Elijah insisted. "This isn't about me anymore," Reed said fiercely. "It's about justice for everyone Blackwood has hurt. Now go." With a heavy heart, Elijah slipped out the back door of the cabin just as pounding began on the front door. He darted into the cover of the pines. The precious documents secured inside his shirt, the rifle clutched in his hands. He hadn't gone 20 yards when he heard the door splinter and shouts fill the night air. "Where's the boy, Reed?" Watkins' voice boomed. "And where are those papers you've been collecting?" Elijah couldn't make out Reed's reply, but it was followed by the sound of something or someone being struck. The boy's hands tightened on the rifle. Every instinct told him to run, to save himself as he'd always done, but something had changed within him. For the first time in years, someone had believed in him, trusted him. He couldn't betray that trust. Silently, Elijah circled back toward the cabin, keeping to the shadows. Through a window he could see Reed on the floor, blood trickling from his mouth. Watkins stood over him while 2 men, the same ones from the saloon robbery, ransacked the cabin. "He's not talking, Sheriff," one of them said, "and there's nothing here." "The boy must have the papers," Watkins concluded. "Spread out and find him. He can't have gone far." The men exited the cabin, and Elijah pressed, himself against the wall, heart pounding. They would search the woods, and eventually they would find him, unless a desperate plan formed in his mind. Moving quickly, he made his way to where their horses were tethered. He selected the largest one, the sheriff's mount, and, with practiced hands, loosened the cinch on the saddle. Then he slapped the horse hard on the rump, sending it galloping away into the night with a startled whinny. The distraction worked. The men came running, cursing as they saw the horse, disappearing into the darkness. "You're after it," Watkins ordered. "That saddlebag has my money in it." 2 of the men mounted up and gave chase, leaving Watkins alone at the cabin. Elijah waited until they were out of sight before making his move. He slipped back to the cabin's front door, rifle raised. Sheriff Watkins was standing over Reed, his gun pointed at the deputy's head. "Last chance, Reed. Where are those papers?" "Right here," Elijah said from the doorway, the Winchester steady in his hands. "Move. Step away from him, Sheriff." Watkins turned slowly, his expression shifting from surprise to calculation. "Now, boy, you don't want to do this. You're already in enough trouble. Running away, stealing, now pointing a gun at an officer. Of the law." "I didn't steal nothing," Elijah replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "And you ain't much of a lawman from what I hear." "Put the gun down, son," Watkins said, his tone softening to something almost fatherly. "This isn't your fight. Give me those papers, and I'll make sure you're taken care of. No more Widow Simmons. Blackwood could use a smart lad like you at his ranch." For a moment, Elijah wavered. The offer was tempting, a way out of his hard-scrabble existence, a place to belong. But then his eyes met Reed's, and he saw in them not just pain, but a faith in him that no one had shown since his parents died. "No deal," Elijah said firmly. "Now drop your gun and back up." Watkins' face hardened. "You've made a mistake, boy." His hand tensed on his revolver. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Watkins began to raise his gun. Reed, summoning strength from somewhere deep within, lunged forward and grabbed the sheriff's legs. As Watkins stumbled, his shot went wild, splintering wood near Elijah's head. The boy didn't hesitate. He fired the Winchester, the sound deafening in the small cabin. Sheriff Watkins crumpled to the floor, clutching his shoulder, where Elijah's bullet had struck. His gun skittered across the floorboards, and Reed kicked it away before collapsing back, exhausted from the effort. "You shot me!" Watkins gasped, more shocked than pained. "You actually shot me!" "Be thankful I aimed for your shoulder," Elijah replied, surprised at his own steadiness. He quickly found rope and, despite the sheriff's protests, bound the man's hands and feet. You'll hang for this," Watkins threatened. "Both of you." "I don't think so," Reed said weakly from the floor. "Not when the federal marshal sees what we have on you and Blackwood." The sound of approaching horses sent Elijah to the window, rifle ready, but it wasn't the returning henchman. Instead, a group of townspeople appeared in the clearing, Mr. Hollister the blacksmith, Dr. Warren, and several others, all armed. "Deputy Reed," Hollister called out. "You in there?" "We're here," Elijah shouted back. "The deputies. Hurt bad, and I've got Sheriff Watkins tied up." There was a moment of stunned silence before the townspeople approached cautiously. Dr. Warren was the first through the door, immediately moving to Reed's side. The others stared in disbelief at the bound sheriff. "What's going on here?" Hollister asked, his gaze moving from Watkins to Elijah to the wounded deputy. "Justice," Reed answered before Elijah could speak. "This boy just helped expose the corruption that's been choking this town. Show them, Elijah." With trembling hands, Elijah produced the packet of documents. As Hollister and the others reviewed the papers, their expressions changed from confusion to anger. "So it's true," Dr. Warren said, looking up from a deed with obvious forgery marks. "Blackwood's been stealing land all along." "And Watkins has been helping him," Reed confirmed, "along with Judge Hartley and 2 members of the town council. That's why we couldn't get a fair hearing when he diverted Miller's Creek," one of the ranchers realized. The whole system was rigged against us." While the others continued examining the evidence, Dr. Warren tended to Reed's wounds. "You need proper medical attention," he told the deputy. "Both these wounds could turn septic. We need to get him to town," Elijah said urgently. "And what about him?" Hollister nodded toward Watkins, who sat sullenly in the corner. "He comes too," Reed said. "He'll stand trial along with Blackwood and the rest, a proper trial with a federal judge." As they prepared to transport Reed and the prisoner back to town, Elijah found himself unexpectedly at the center of attention. People who had previously looked through him now regarded him with respect, even admiration. "You did good, son," Hollister told him, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. "Real good." The journey back to Redemption Creek was tense. They expected to encounter Blackwood's men at any moment, but the night remained quiet. It wasn't until they reached the outskirts of town that they learned why. The two henchmen who had chased after the sheriff's horse had run directly into a detachment of U.S. cavalry that happened to be passing through the area. Upon finding the men armed and suspicious, the soldiers had detained them and brought them to town, where they now sat in the very jail cells they had helped fill with innocent men. The next few days passed in a blur for Elijah. Federal marshals arrived from Cheyenne, taking custody of Watkins and arresting Blackwood and his associates. The documents Elijah had saved provided the evidence needed to begin unraveling years of corruption and intimidation. Deputy Reed, despite his injuries, was appointed interim sheriff by the town council. Those members not implicated in the scandal, at least. From his recovery bed at Dr. Warren's home, he began the process of restoring law and order to Redemption Creek. And Elijah, he found himself suddenly transformed from invisible orphan to town hero. Offers of homes and apprenticeships came from all directions. Mr. Hollister wanted him at the blacksmith shop. The general store owner thought he showed promise as a clerk. Even some of the ranchers suggested he might have a future in the cattle business. But it was Reed's offer that meant the most. "And I could use a deputy," he told Elijah when the boy came to visit him. "Not officially, of course. You're too young for that. But I need someone I can trust, someone who knows right from wrong and has the courage to stand up for it." Do you mean like an apprentice lawman?" Elijah asked, unable to hide his excitement. "Something like that," Reed smiled. "You'd have a proper home, proper schooling, and when you're old enough, if you still want it, a real badge." For Elijah, who had planned to run away just days before, the offer represented everything he had been seeking: purpose, belonging, a future. But more than that, it meant being valued for who he was, not just what he could do for others. "I'd like that," he said simply. "I'd like that very much." In the weeks that followed, Redemption Creek began to change. With Blackwood's grip broken, homesteaders who had been forced out began to return. Water flowed freely again as diverted streams were restored to their natural courses. The town council, reformed with honest citizens, began addressing long-neglected issues. The transformation wasn't immediate or without challenges. Blackwood's remaining supporters, though diminished, still harbored resentment. Some of the wealthier merchants who had profited from his corrupt dealings found themselves facing boycotts from newly empowered homesteaders. The saloon owner, Pete Morrison, who had served as Blackwood's unofficial enforcer, left town one night, without a word, taking his gambling debts and bitter grudges with him. But for every person who resisted change, two more embraced it. The school mom, Miss Eleanor Hartwell, approached Sam about helping her establish a proper school building. "We've been holding classes in the back of the general store," she explained, her kind eyes crinkling with determination. "Indeed, these children deserve better, and I believe you could help us build something lasting." Sam found himself coordinating construction efforts, his organizational skills proving invaluable. He worked alongside Deputy Marshal Hayes, whose arm was healing well under Doc Peterson's care. The lawman had become something of a mentor to Sam, teaching him not just about justice and law enforcement, but about leadership and responsibility. "You've got good instincts, son," Hayes told him one afternoon as they supervised the raising of the school's frame. "Ever think about wearing a badge yourself someday?" The idea both thrilled and terrified Sam. He'd spent so long running from authority that the thought of representing it seemed almost impossible. Yet he couldn't deny the appeal of protecting others the way Hayes had protected him. Meanwhile, The investigation into Blackwood's network revealed the true scope of his corruption. Federal marshals arrived from Cheyenne, led by a stern but fair man named Marshal William Crawford. They uncovered evidence of land fraud, water rights theft, and intimidation that stretched across 3 counties. Oh, this Blackwood character had his fingers in more pies than we initially realized, Crawford explained to the town council during a packed meeting at the newly rebuilt church. We've found forged documents, bribed officials, and a network of hired guns that terrorized honest folks from here to Colorado. The revelations vindicated many families who had lost their land or been driven away. The Kowalski family, Polish immigrants who had been forced to abandon their homestead the previous year, returned with tears in their eyes and determination in their hearts. Mrs. Kowalski sought out Sam personally to thank him. "My husband, he say you are hero," she said in broken English, pressing a small wooden cross into his hands. "You give us back our home, our hope." Sam was overwhelmed by such gratitude. He'd never thought of himself as a hero, just a scared kid trying to survive. But as more families shared similar stories, he began to understand the ripple effects of his and Hayes's actions. The town's economic recovery proved equally dramatic. With Blackwood's monopolistic practices ended, competition flourished. A second general store opened, run by the returning Kowalski family. A new blacksmith set up shop, offering fair prices that undercut Blackwood's inflated rates. Even the bank, once under Blackwood's thumb, began offering reasonable loans to homesteaders and small business owners. Dr. Peterson found himself busier than ever, but in a good way. Instead of treating victims of Blackwood's violence, he was delivering babies, setting broken bones from honest work accidents, and providing routine medical care to a growing population. "This is what a real community looks like," he told Sam one evening as they shared dinner at the boarding house. The people helping each other, building something together instead of tearing each other down. The boarding house itself had undergone changes. Mrs. Abernathy, emboldened by the town's transformation, had expanded her establishment and hired 2 local women as help. She'd also started a small lending library in the front parlor, encouraging literacy and learning among the townspeople. Sam's role in the community continued to evolve. He found himself mediating disputes, organizing community projects, and serving as an unofficial liaison between the various groups that made up Redemption Creek's diverse population. His experiences as an outsider gave him unique insight into the challenges faced by newcomers and marginalized residents. One particularly memorable incident involved a group of Chinese railroad workers who had been stranded when their construction project was cancelled. They faced hostility from some townspeople who viewed them with suspicion and prejudice. Sam, remembering his own experience as an unwelcome outsider, spoke passionately at a town meeting about the importance of inclusion and tolerance. "I was once where they are now," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the packed room. "Hungry, scared, with nowhere to go. This town gave me a chance when I didn't deserve one. Seems to me that's what Redemption Creek should be about, giving people chances to prove themselves." His words, backed by Deputy Hayes and other respected community members, helped shift public opinion. The Chinese workers were welcomed and found employment in various local businesses, their skills and work ethic quickly earning respect. As autumn approached, bringing cooler temperatures and the promise of harvest, Redemption Creek prepared for its first annual Founders' Day celebration, a new tradition proposed by the Reformed Town Council. The event would commemorate not the town's original founding, but its rebirth as a community based on justice and mutual support. Sam found himself on the planning committee, working alongside people who had once viewed him with suspicion or indifference. The transformation was remarkable, but it hadn't come without personal cost. The constant responsibility and public attention sometimes overwhelmed him, and he occasionally longed for the simplicity of his earlier, solitary existence. During one particularly stressful week, when disputes over the celebration's planning threatened to divide the committee, Sam confided his doubts to Deputy Hayes. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm cut out for all this," he admitted, as they sat on the porch of the jail, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "And maybe I should just move on, find somewhere quiet where nobody knows my story." Hayes was quiet for a long moment before responding. "You know, Sam, I felt the same way when I first pinned on this badge. Wondered if I had any business. Trying to keep the peace when I'd made my share of mistakes. But I learned something important. It's not about being perfect. It's about being willing to do the right thing, even when it's hard." The deputy's words resonated deeply with Sam, reminding him why he'd chosen to stay and fight for Redemption Creek's future. This wasn't just about gratitude or obligation. It was about belonging to something larger than himself, about building the kind of community he'd always dreamed of finding. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sam made his decision. He would stay, would continue to grow with this town that had given him everything he'd never dared to hope for. The runaway orphan was finally home,